Okay, I think my face on the big screen means that we can get started. Welcome everyone to the Academia panel for the CSPC 2024 Federal Budget Symposium. My name is Matt McTaggart. I'm an assistant professor at the Royal Military College of Canada and work with the VPR here. And I wish to acknowledge first that I'm speaking from Kingston, Ontario, on Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Huron-Wendat territory. It's my feeling that with acknowledgement comes obligation. So today, as we're discussing the federal budget, I'm thinking about particularly the limestone that was carved out of the land and used to build RMC in the colonial pattern. And I ask that during our conversations, we all consider the resources that academic institutions have extracted from the land in the past and how we can allocate them for a more inclusive, and equitable knowledge generation systems in the future. I'm joined today by an incredible panel whose perspectives I'm personally very excited to hear. First, Dr. Chad Gaffield, the CEO of the U15 Group, Dr. Les Jacobs, VP Research and Innovation at Ontario Tech University, Dr. Lisa Kalinchuk, VP Research and Innovation at the University of Victoria, Dr. Nancy Ross, the VP Research at Queen's University, Dr. Dominique Berube, VP Research and Graduate Studies at Concordia University, and finally, Thomas Bailey, the co-president of the Ontario Ottawa Science Policy Network. Before we get started, just a little housekeeping. First is a reminder that you can only interact with the session through the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. The chat function is only to communicate with the organizers and not the panel. So if you put your questions in there, I'm not going to see them and I'm not going to ask them. Second, please ask your questions, but also upvote any question you want answered. The ones that rise to the top are going to be the first posed to the panel. You will now, or very shortly, see on your screen the first of a few polls that will appear during the session. We all appreciate your input, and we'll use that information by CSPC to keep bringing you vital discussions such as today's budget discussion. So, without any further ado, each panelist is going to take about 5 minutes to present their perspective on the budget, and afterwards we're going to get to the audience questions. So, if we can please begin, Dr. Chad Gaffield.
Thank you so much, Matt, and thanks to the Canadian Science Policy Centre for inviting me to this, and it's wonderful to be here. I thought as my contribution, I would attempt to explain something that I really think needs some explaining, and that is the fact that in this past budget, we have received a really significant increase. It's about going to leave us after 5 years with a research ecosystem that's about 30% larger. You also will have noticed the major research facilities funding that got added in. You also will have noticed the AI money, some of which definitely is going to end up on our campuses and so on. And I'd also add something that maybe wasn't remarked on is that the councils, the research agencies got exempted from the great 3% cut that went across government. And so I think we're going to ask ourselves, well, how did this come to be? And especially in light of the fact that in recent years, we've been disappointed, frankly, to see that there haven't been investments. So what was different? And I think there are a lot of things, but I'm going to highlight 3 because I think they have some enduring importance to this. The first thing is I think that the value proposition for research was rearticulated and freshened in a way that does much better justice to why we do research, why we fund research, and why it's important to Canada. And that is to focus on what I like to think about as the guaranteed return on investment of talent development. I think for a long time, we focused on how our research projects were going to make great discoveries, we're going to advance knowledge in ways that was really significant and so on. All of that is true. But in the meantime, and the absolute, I would argue, the most enduringly important feature of our research activities it allows the development of highly qualified talent that I think is becoming increasingly key distinguishing characteristic of successful 21st century societies, economies, and so on. So I think really freshening and emphasizing the extent to which our research investments are really producing the kind of human capital that is key in the 21st century. The second piece is related to that, and that is the importance of the student voices, the voices of graduate students, the voices of postdocs, the voices of kind of that emerging generation. And I think there's no doubt that as we were re-articulating and freshening how we were presenting the value proposition and talking about the value proposition of research, there was a visceral and personification of the importance of that, and support our science, I think, was important in that, and as well all along the way, and we were certainly heavily involved in this, featuring the stories of students and stories about actual brain drain became important. Our inability to compete in an increasingly competitive global environment and so on, and having all that be real in the sense of the people affected by that and the future of Canada in many ways. So I think really showcasing the value proposition in terms of the actual specific examples of students affected by all this, and I think that includes undergraduate students as well, looking toward their own future. And I think in those voices, we added into this, and I think it is so important, those involved in the major research projects, not just those that have scholarships, fellowships, but also those that have the research assistantships. And we are doing a much better job in actually demonstrating that a research grant goes to students in significant and at a significant percentage of the amounts awarded, half, 2/3, and 3/4, and so on. So I think that kind of component of research activities, I think, became a real feature, and those voices were very, very important. The third thing I want to emphasize is the importance of what's become known as the Bouchard Report. This was an advisory panel appointed by government, and from my point of view, was so important because it was composed of researchers. It was composed of kind of key leaders, academic leaders, and it was suggesting that if we can do better in terms of the way in which we think about the research support system and so on, that we in fact are in a good position to suggest steps forward. And I think the Bouchard Report played a really, really important role in really getting that sense of ownership and a sense of the fact that we are able to update our organization and we don't need other outside forces doing it to us. That sense of ownership and buy-in, I think, was also really evident in what we became known as the Coalition for Canadian Research, where we brought together advocacy groups and so on, and were able to together, and in what I always like to call it a shoulder-shoulder way, emphasize the extent to which investing in research activities has immediate as well as long-term enduring value and is really at the heart of building a better future for Canada. And I think that single message, that emphasis, that kind of very cohesive plan, that I think it was to use a basketball image, a real full court press, was able to allow us to break through a lot of the noise, a lot of the competing priorities. And I think it's thanks to many people in this room and others, and on this panel and others, that together, I think we were able to do something that is really helps make Canada's future a lot brighter. And I think when we opened the budget and we saw the numbers and so on, I think we felt that better about our chances for succeeding in a really turbulent world in which the competitive global stage is really very, very challenging for Canada. So I'll stop there and happy to pick up on that, any of that or other aspects. Thank you.
Thank you, Chad. Lots to think about there for student development as well as where the voices are coming from, students, researchers, and organizations such as yours. So next we'll hear from Les Jacobs at Ontario Tech University.
Thank you, everyone. I want to acknowledge the terrific symposium that CSPC has put together, and in particular, the idea that there are multiple perspectives on the budget when it comes to research and science. So kudos for pulling together a really diverse symposium. My comments complement what Gab was just saying, with some caveats. For some of you who maybe were not particularly paying close attention, without a doubt from the research community, the most significant single piece in the budget was the address around the research fellowships for master's and doctoral students as well as postdocs. And it very much has moved Canadian federally funded fellowships into the middle range of our international competitors, and that is a really significant development and something that has fallen on deaf ears for years, and it's finally been remedied. Noting, however, that at every Canadian university, the graduate students who are funded through those federal fellowships make up a relatively small number of all of our graduate students contributing to the research enterprise, and there has been less the remedies for employment income and on is still remains to be achieved. The pieces that I would sort of stress more generally is that one of the important dimensions of university research in Canada has been the evolution of what the talent piece looks like. And the graduate fellowship programs, which are largely date back now sort of 2 generations, are complemented with what now is often described as work integrated learning. And the WIL programs have been are significant beneficiaries in this budget, and they fit into the broader scheme of the heavy investment that we've seen into, in particular, MyTechs, where our graduate students undertake research placements with industry or community partners, and they're funded generally sort of 50-50, but sometimes 75-25. But those are a very, very important piece of what the research enterprise looks like in the university. And again, kudos to the federal government that that was not on the cutting block. Even though there were new investments here, that sustained commitment to that is really notable. The third piece, I would say, and again, Gad touched on this, but I would be a little bit more explicit about it. Increasingly, what we've seen with this government, and arguably with the previous government as well, is them identifying the strategic priority areas where they are flowing disproportionately research money, and in particular research money involving industry collaboration. And so the two areas highlighted in particular in the budget, the clean energy net zero and AI applications, really shows that in spades. From Ontario Tech's perspective, these nicely align with our own strategic priorities, but more or less regardless of how well they align with a particular university, there is something refreshing about the transparency of setting those priorities and actually creating a sustained funding for them, even though, as we heard from the earlier panels, a lot of that funding is a longer time out. I do have sort of two cautions. One is that all of us have interacted with Frederick Bouchard around the Bouchard report, and the caution about cherry picking from that report is just worth noting. And I think that there is some clear evidence in the budget that there is cherry picking about what will be supported. The final thing I was thinking about, what was sort of missed in the budget, or at least you'd have to be generous to read it into it, is that we're now engaging with EU Horizon, and the federal government has invested considerable money into creating that opportunity for Canadian universities. But I think on the ground, Canadian universities, and in particular, Vice President of Research and Innovation like myself, are looking at the sunk costs to really take advantage of those EU Horizon opportunities, the heavy initial investment. And it would have been very, very positive feature of the budget if that had been recognized in some way. So thank you, and I look forward to the Q&A.
Thank you, Les. And I think you raised some interesting points around the distribution between the talent training pipeline and the industries that stand to benefit from it. If we could please hear next from Lisa Kalinchuk at the University of Victoria.
Thanks very much, Matt. I really appreciate the opportunity to contribute to this meaningful discussion today. But just before I comment on the budget, I would like to acknowledge that I'm joining you today from the University of Victoria, which is located on the traditional territory of Lekwungen peoples. And I'd also like to pay my respects to the Songhees, Esquimalt, and Wasanich peoples whose historical relationships with these lands continue to this day. So I guess a lot of what I'm going to say is going to echo what the first two speakers have reflected on, but I think there's no doubt that Budget 2025 is a good one for academic research. And so I might differ a bit and just start by thanking a couple of groups. I think it's really important to recognize Minister Champagne for being such a strong advocate for our sector, and also for the federal government for recognizing the value of university-based research and the need to support major research facilities in our country. I also want to echo the comments of the first two speakers around the efforts of Frederick Bouchard and the esteemed group that helped him develop his report. You know, I think we all understand that Canadians across the country are worried about many pressing issues. And so this wasn't an easy year for the government to invest in research. And so, you know, you could easily imagine that the Bouchard report could have sat on the shelf for another year or more years. And so I think, you know, we need to think about, why did we get movement this year? And I think one of the reasons why that happened is because of the incredible job Frederick's done to promote the report. It wasn't just released, But he took every advantage to talk to people about it, to the academic community, to government, basically to anyone who would listen, about why research in Canada needs more dollars and some really key system changes if we want to stay relevant and continue to be a credible player on the global stage. For me, one of the key investments in budget 2024 is the new money to support graduate students and postdocs, and we've already heard about that. But of course, we know talent is essential in our ecosystem. Our graduate students and postdocs are the engines of new discovery and innovation on all of our campuses. And they're also the thought leaders and skilled workers of tomorrow. And we know that, we can't assume they're going to stay here. They're going to go where there's support, and they're going to go where they feel valued. So this investment is crucial because it'll help us retain more of our best talent at home in our country. And I also think it will help us address a challenge that I've seen in recent years, and that is the time to completion for our graduate students. We've noticed that that's been creeping up. And I think part of the reason for that is because more students have needed to take outside jobs to earn enough money to sustain themselves. So the higher stipends in this budget will mean that our students can focus on their research and their professional development. They can finish more quickly and they can enter the workforce. Make one comment about the University of Victoria. We're really fortunate to host the Prime Minister on April 19th in his first stop post-budget. And one of the comments I want to make about that visit was how impressed I was by the way the PM interacted with our students. He was genuinely keen to meet them and to learn about what they were doing. He even went back to speak to some of the students after his media event was over. And it's amazing. That had such a big impact on them. They felt seen, they felt valued, and their excitement after the event was just really clear to all of us who were in attendance. And I'm sure they're going to carry that forward, and it'll have a big impact on them as they think toward their future careers. So all this is to say that government investment and also government interest in the next generation, for me, is a foundational piece in this budget, because these are the people who are going to generate the creative solutions we need and who are going to spur economic growth and prosperity for all Canadians in the decades to come. I also want to highlight the commitment in budget 2024 to support some of Canada's major research facilities. Many of our researchers need access to world-class facilities to do their work. And just in this case, I'll provide the example of the $400 million in support for Triumph. That's going to benefit 550 researchers from 21 universities across our country. It's also going to benefit the 600 local staff and students that they have on site every day, allowing Canada to maintain its longstanding collaborations with major facilities located throughout the world. It's also going to allow us to continue to lead in research and train the most promising talent in nuclear medicine, material science, and particle physics. And that brings me to one other important point that I wanted to make. As excited as we are about the dollars included in budget 2024, I think this budget is about more than the dollars. And I think it would be a mistake for us to focus solely on the monetary commitments, because there's some really important non-monetary pieces that I think we should be excited about. I think Les mentioned this, but budget 2024 sends a clear signal about some of the areas where Canada wants to lead globally and how research can play a key role in those aspirations. For me, when I look at the areas of investment, it's clear that we're starting to make some noise about how Canada wants to aspire to be at the forefront of discovery and innovation in physics and nuclear sciences. I just mentioned Triumph, AI and quantum and clean tech and clean energy. And I think it's vitally important for us to make these choices because we don't have the scale to try to be good at everything. And I think we heard this morning in David's presentation that Canada currently sits 15th in the Global Innovation Index. And we've got countries like Singapore and Switzerland and Sweden ahead of us. I think one reason why we're not where we should be in terms of innovation and productivity is because we haven't been going for gold, right? Other countries have already made these choices and they're seeing the benefits. So I think by signaling the areas where we intend to be best, Canada will attract more R&D investment from private sector companies who are already working on the technologies that we'll need 50 years from now and who need the best ideas to help them get there. And of course, more investment from the private sector will benefit our entire ecosystem. I think Budget 2024 also launches important system changes that will address gaps in our ecosystem. In particular, the creation of a capstone agency will help us better support interdisciplinary and mission-driven work and provide a badly needed single point of contact for global partners to connect with the Canadian ecosystem. I think this is highlighted really well in the Bouchard report, that one challenge we have is that Canada doesn't have a single front door for international connections. Our fragmented system means that it's really hard for potential global partners to know who to talk to. So a lot of them don't even try. And that means we're missing opportunities. I think the capstone agency needs to address this issue. Similarly, the new Advisory Council on Science and Innovation can be an important liaison between government and the academic community. So letting our community know where government priorities lie and ensuring the government remains aware of the value proposition of academic research. But here, implementation is the key. I think we need to realize there's still an opportunity for us to influence the development of these two structures. So we need to engage as much as we can with those in government who are developing these new entities to ensure that they work well and are a value add for our community. And so maybe just to end, I'll make one other point, and that is to note that, I think we can all talk about how much post-secondary institutions serve as a pillar in our community, how we drive employment, how we drive economic growth. In the case of UVic, we know that we add $3.3 billion to British Columbia's economy, and within the Greater Victoria area, we add $1.8 billion to the local economy and support 1 out of every 9 jobs. So investing in universities and academic research results in an incredible return for taxpayers. And I think this budget demonstrates that government understands that, but we still have a problem because the public doesn't seem to share this sentiment. A recent study by Abacus Data showed that only 50% of Canadians have a positive impression of universities, compared to 64% in 2020. And only 31% of Canadians believe that university research leads to discoveries that improve people's lives. If the public doesn't value our work, it's going to be difficult for any government to continue to invest in us. So we have to work harder to better engage the public to demonstrate the value of what we're doing. We can't sit back on our campuses. We have to tell the stories that illustrate how we're contributing solutions to the pressing societal challenges of the day, how we're driving innovation, and how we're contributing to economic development and increased prosperity for all Canadians. I think, as welcome as this budget is, we all know that this is just the first step. Our research is expensive and our competitors are investing heavily. Even with these investments, Canada is still falling behind other OECD countries, as we heard from David earlier today. So I'll just end by saying, if we truly want to be in the game of leading discovery and the advancement of knowledge in strategic areas, we're going to need more budgets like this one. And in order to convince this government, or any government for that matter, to continue to invest, we're going to need a groundswell of public support. And it's up to us to build that foundation so that we can really ensure that we will have future investment as well. So thank you. I'll now turn it over to the next speaker.
Thank you, Lisa. And I think you raised some important points around both the groundswell of voices and the receptive ears to hear them, as well as lending both material and moral support to the sector. So next, please, if we could hear from Nancy Ross, VP Research at Queen's University.
Well, thanks a lot, Matt, and a real pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation to be here, and congratulations on the organization of this important dialogue. And having academia and industry and not-for-profit sector is a beautiful idea today. So overall, I think we should be smiling in the research community from Budget 2024. The last time we saw an increase like this was 2018 following the Naylor report, and it's not really an increase like this. This increase is actually almost double of that of 2018. So I think, it is a very good news story for research. Now, Canadian researchers are smart and creative and have phenomenal ideas right now simmering. And so there's always room for more. But I would say, you know, a huge thanks to ISED and the minister and speaking to finance and the PMO to get us to where we are post-budget 2024. I think it is a good news story. I think like Lisa Bouchard could have sat for a long time, and it has not. Bouchard took months. Actually, their work was done in months, and a tremendous amount of consultation in a very short period of time to come up with a document that's very meaningful today in budget 2024. Like others, I know there's a lot of support for the graduate student funding. This has been a long time in coming, and it's at a value, you know, for postdocs at $70,000, doctoral at $40,000, masters at $27,000, getting us in the game internationally. I think the budget as a whole is getting us our name out there internationally. I know Chad has done an interview with Nature has taken notice of the federal investment here. And so sending the signal internationally that we're in the game here in Canada has been, at this time, is really important. And I will say it's particularly important in the major research facility story from budget 2024. So that's $500 million over 5 years for some Canadian major research facilities. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the one I know best, the MacDonald Institute at Queen's University. And so what this has meant, what the $45.5 million investment for the MacDonald Institute, which is a network of experimental physicists and theoretical physicists across the country, is that now the U.S. Department of Energy sees Canada's investment here in the people that are responsible for the major global experiments in astroparticle physics. And so they're now aware that Canada is supporting these. Canada is a partner in these. These are major international global experiments. They attract major international foreign direct investment to Canada. So some excitement for the community here, particularly at Queen's, but around the country, that Canada is in the game here. The new Capstone Research Funding Organization, certainly welcome. And when we see these, it also opens up the question all the time about the proper balance between pure discovery-led research, like you have in your NSERC Discovery Grant, and how much we should put towards mission-driven research. I think these debates happen a lot across the country. So having a new capstone organization that will be charged not just with the mechanics of the mission-driven research, but rather with some of the strategizing around this and reporting back to Canadians about it. So I'm quite excited. I think there's still some discussions to be had about what's the right balance that we set in this country between investigator-driven research and mission-driven research. Remember that mRNA, for example, came out of lots of blood, sweat, and tears and unfunded research, and then turned out to be a global savior, both in terms of lives and the global economy very recently, and that wasn't mission-driven, right? So we have to always remember that new things come that we can't see coming. I'm personally also really excited about the $2.4 billion for AI. It's a great signal that builds on Canada's expertise here in some strong researchers in many institutions across Canada. And I think a recognition that the AI research has been extremely valuable to the global economic and intellectual communities. But now we're missing some of the infrastructure to make it sing and dance in a real way. And so the missing piece on the exascale level supercomputing, I think, is embedded in here. I think the developing of the new AI sovereign compute strategy is going to be extremely interesting. It's a 5-year plan. I'm more hopeful that this is hurried up a little bit more. I think the need is great, and the need is now for Canada to remain competitive with the new computing capacity. If you read in the budget too, there's a note about the MOU with NVIDIA here, and there's a note about an MOU with the UK. And so I think seeing some of how these details will play out, how NVIDIA's role, the role of the UK on the $2.4 billion will be really interesting in the next, I think in the fall economic statement. I'm hopeful we're going to see some more details around that, but it's a very big signal. I think a bigger signal around AI and compute than any of us was expecting. So also a really important signal there. I think too, if I look us overall here, this is maybe the last budget that gets implemented by this government. So I'm thrilled that research was such a big part of that. If we look at it, it's about 5.6 billion and a fair chunk of the overall new investments here. So I'm really grateful that it came out at the time that it did. Note that some of the 1.8 billion over 5 to the granting councils, very welcome again, double that of Naylor, is backloaded, right? So I think some people look at the dollars and go, oh, 5 years is a long time away. I guess it gives us some time to make sure the money's there in the bank. And people have said to me, well, what if everything changes? Will that money be there? And I think my answer is like, not many guarantees in life, but having this here enshrined in budget 2024 gives us, as the research community, the best chance, I think, going forward. So I'm grateful that it's here. I think it's a good news story overall. I'll stop there, Matt.
Okay. Thank you very much, Nancy. I agree. I think that this does send a real signal, both internally and internationally, and it'll be interesting to hear who hears it. Okay, if we could please now hear from Dominique Bérubé at Concordia University. Please go ahead.
Oui, merci beaucoup, Matt. Bonjour tout le monde. Merci de participer aujourd'hui. Je pense que c'est une discussion qui est... Je savais que je parlais un peu vers la fin des intervenants. Donc, j'ai préparé mes notes en essayant de pas trop faire le résumé de tout le budget. I've got a segue to what Nancy was discussing regarding the sort of the spread of the budget that was awarded to the granting agencies. I was looking at the budget, and of course, I'm out of the public service for 2 years now, almost 2 years. And so it's very difficult not to read a budget and trying to imagine my colleagues reading between each lines and awaiting the treasury board reading the next day that's going to tell them a bit more information than in fact we have ourselves at the moment. You can try to sort of guess what exactly is being meant by each. Regarding the spread, I've had the same discussions, Nancy, regarding how that advancement is in fact mostly being delivered in year 3, 4, 5. I personally respond that I think it's a good thing. If they give everything in the first year, if they give, and they spread it in the first year, they need to commit it the first year, then it's committed for 3, 4 years, and then there's nothing new that they can do for the next 3, 4 years. So that's not useful for the researchers. That's not useful for the agencies. So I think the government was smart in really scoping it and trying to create a real commitment over the years. My impression of the budget is that reading all of the budget was really that there was a question of responsibility for the institutions. When you read, it's the government listen and obviously to the voice of the students and increase the values of the scholarship and also increase the values of the grants to make sure that the universities and the researchers were also able to better support the students. And that part was really not sure that we're going to get. I think that there was a lot of uncertainty that the government, so very important to recognize that special and major effort that was made. But responsibility, because there is an expectation now that we will also better support our students, and we don't have the control on what the researchers do with the individual grants that they will get. So how do we make sure that that increase of funding that is being awarded to the agencies also contributes to the welfare of our students? And we all see that we're committed to that welfare, but I think we need to make that effort to put in place the right policies and processes to make sure that it's the students that can benefit. And a big impact of those investments, of course, is about the well-being of those students, but that's not new research. I mean, when you increase for significantly the values of the scholarship, you don't produce more research. You might produce better research, you might produce students that will finish quicker, as was discussed before, but it's not new research. And yes, they increased a bit the numbers of scholarship, but we all know also that that's a minimal part of the numbers of students that are being supported in that case. So again, there's a message there in terms of our capacity. And if you look around, that was be my second interpretation, you know, and I was really looking into the budget and where they put their investments. And it was raised in some previous panels also, is that there are some important indication in the budgets of where the government wants to be able to push. And I do remember from 2018 that one of the questions that the government was asking the agencies was, what about the strategic plans of the institutions, you know, and how are the institutions using these strategic plans to better respond to the needs of the Canadian society? And we sort of know that our strategic plans are more of a list of what we see as being our institutional strength and less how to respond to Canada's priorities. And I think that there's a concern there, and that's also the message that we received to the budget. When you see the targeted investment, and I think Dave Waters was talking about the fragmentation of the ecosystem in general and how they fund, we also need to recognize that and be able to really act upon our strength and be selective on our niche and be careful about the spreading, you know, in terms of the investment. We're a small country and we need to really be able to invest in excellence and make a difference with the kind of investments that we have. But overall, obviously, a very positive budget. I think it was really awaited for. And if we want more in the next 5 years, we need to start. I think it's the era of the deliverables. It's less about claiming that we get a new grant. It's about claiming that we had an impact with the funding that we receive and be able to demonstrate that impact for the government.
Merci beaucoup de vos commentaires. And I agree. I think it's important to point out the shared responsiveness and responsibility between the government and the institutions. So thank you very much for that. And then our last speaker is going to be Thomas Bailey from the Ottawa Science Policy Network. And following his comments, we're going to use the last 15 minutes or so to answer your questions from the audience. So Thomas, please go ahead.
Thanks for the invitation. So I'm a current PhD student in physics at the University of Ottawa, and I'm invited here as the co-president of the Ottawa Science Policy Network, which is a student-run organization interested in science policy at the University of Ottawa. I'm also, as part of that, serve on the Support Our Science Executive Council, and so I was quite heavily involved in the campaign from the grassroots graduate students and postdoctoral scholars side. So I guess when looking at this budget, the first thing I looked at was really comparing this to the Support Our Science asks. So we had 4 main asks. So the first ask was to increase the value of the tri-agency graduate scholarships and postdoctoral fellowships. And in this sense, this budget completely, it blew our ass out of the water, to be honest. The values increased by more than we asked and are now completely, as people said, completely internationally competitive in the values that they're offering. The second of the Support Our Science asks was to increase the number of, well, the second and third of scholarships and fellowships. And in this sense, the budget definitely delivered this to some degree. It's promised an additional 1,720 across all the different scholarships and fellowships. I don't think the breakdown of what levels these will be have been announced yet, but this is definitely a move in the right direction and the first significant increase, I think, really since these scholarships. Well, there was a small increase to master's scholarships in 2018, but definitely to PhD and postdoctoral fellowships. This is the first significant increase, to my knowledge, since I think they were created in 2003. The fourth of our asks was to increase the tri-agency budgets for research grants. Since, as has been mentioned, the vast majority of graduate students and postdoctoral scholars do not receive their stipends or fellowships directly from the tri-agencies through scholarships, but rather through stipends, research assistantships, etc., are mainly provided through research grants. And so we recognize that to be able to enable the majority of students to receive an increase, this would need to come through grants. And so we were really pleased to see the increase in grants that were in this budget. So from the point of view for us, we were very happy to see all of them were addressed in at least some way, and some more completely or even more completely than we'd hoped for. On then looking at the comments of what some of these impacts are, I would say on the scholarships, they're a little bit backloaded, but a lot of the increases come immediately from next year, which is really nice to see. So going forward in 5 years plus, it's the budget commits to an additional $200 million per year, but from next year we will see 142 million. So nearly 3/4 of the long-term increase will be seen immediately. So that's really nice to see. We're still a little bit uncertain of exactly what the impact of the new scholarship system will be. Now it's unified, it will no longer be done through the Tri-Council. So what will be the breakdown between different fields, between the different levels, how many will be for masters, how many will be for PhD, how many will be for postdoctoral scholars. There's still also a little bit of unclarity of whether there'll be any opportunity for international students who make up a significant proportion of all students in Canada, but particularly at the graduate level, particularly in science. And so the Science and Research Committee's report on graduate student financial support suggested opening this up to all international students. We're unclear if this will happen. And the Vanier Scholarship, which was the only federal scholarship that was open to international students, no longer will exist. And so we're looking to see, is there anything, maybe even if it's a small quota for international students, whether anything will be offered. On the grant increases, really echoing the previous speaker's points of how will this feed through to graduate students. We're really looking forward to see what policies are created to do this, whether at the department level, the faculty, university, or Tri-Council level. I think they all have a role to play to pressure everyone into moving in the same direction. Because all too often from the grassroots and graduate student level, when we've asked and said this is an issue, the current stipend levels are too low, the pushback we always receive is there's not more money in the grants, what can we do? So now that there is more money in the grants, particularly over the next few years, so there's times to create these policies, it's going to be really interesting to see what policies are created to ensure that a significant proportion of this increase is able to feed through to graduate students and postdoctoral fellows. Otherwise, I think that's the end of my comments. I'll try and keep to time.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Thomas. And yeah, I agree. I think it's a real lesson in how leveraging our legitimacy as graduate students and researchers through political engagement can achieve some important ends for our sector. So that's thank you all for your comments and for your perspectives. I think you've raised some just excellent and really engaging points. Before we go on to the audience question, in my excitement to join the panel today, I was remiss in forgetting to thank Alice Aiken, the VP of Research and Innovation, who was meant to moderate this panel, and unfortunately had to be called away at the last second. So thank you, Alice, and I'm just pleased as punch to be able to be here with you in her place. So we do have some great audience questions, and I've got the go ahead to extend the panel if we feel the need, so we can steal a little bit of the break time for those who aren't running off to get some coffee. And I'm going to start with, as promised, the question that had the most upvotes. And since it's a tie, I'm going to combine a few of them here around the creation of the new capstone funding organization. And I'm going to try to phrase that to catch them and maybe to lead us into a conversation here. So a capstone of that size landing on the science policy landscape is going to make some tremors, is going to displace some other things. So maybe we could discuss what are some of the reforms that would be needed to make sure that they're able to meet their mandate, and how their role might be shaped to achieve some of the ends that they're meant to in terms of innovation strategy, goal setting, specifically around some of this mission-driven research in the future. So I think we discussed. So we'll start at where we ended with the discussion with Thomas. If you'd like to lead off, if not, I'm happy to just watch for raised hands and send it to whoever we would like.
I have some comments. Broadly on the highest level structures, I'm certainly no expert in it. I do not have the deep expertise of how the Canada's research ecosystem functions. However, I will say from the next generation researcher perspective, we would really like to have a next generation researcher voices involved in some way in this new capstone agency. Since one of the things we found is we had no real clear voice for the last 20 years and nothing changed. And so it would really be good to be integrated at every level of decision making going forwards. And ideally in a more than like a box checking way and actually deeply involved in the consultation.
Yeah, I think again we have a lesson in how including students as more than token representatives can really make a big shift. So I see Les's hands up, so we'll go to him next, please.
Sure. I think that one of the fundamental issues is whether the entire Canada Research Chair program goes into this capstone, and whether that's treated as an opportunity to rejig some of the purposes and perhaps arguably better align the Canada Research Chair program with some of these mission challenges, where right now it's not a perfect fit. So that would be sort of something I think that we can really look for in the short run, and probably related to that, I would say the question of where IRAP ends up.
Thank you. So I looked away for a moment and every hand raised. So I'm not sure which order they went up. Maybe we could go to Dominic and then Nancy and then Chad. Is that?
Pretty sure that Chad raised his hand before.
Oh, okay. Well, then we'll do it the opposite. That's fine. So Chad, please.
Well, I was just going to emphasize something that Dominique knows exceedingly well as others, and that is our hope and our message about the capstone, and I think the way it's being seen as it's the next step, in fact, an evolutionary process. I think the shop that Dominique ran for years, TIPS as we know it, had really gone down this path. So we've been emphasizing like crazy now that we do not have to take the risk of the innovation corporation disaster and so on, but rather think about this is in a spirit of continuous improvement, a movement toward embracing the increasing importance of interdisciplinary, mission-driven and internationally focused research. So it seems to me that if we can see this as in the spirit of trying to get the best of both discipline-based specialized research and research that cuts across various fields, and whether it's campus to the larger community or internationally and so on, I think we can be optimistic about this, but we must do it all in a way that does not disrupt the system, does not forget that we cannot pause, we cannot let ourselves get distracted by any of this. And partly I think it's because fortunately we have more money now, and there is that permanent funding, and I think related to some of the earlier issues, I think we've already heard some of our major universities are raising the research assistantship levels, for example, already in their institutions in light of this. So I think that's great. 1,700 more scholarships, fellowships, that increases the number by 30%. That's significant. And I think it's incumbent upon us in this to tell the stories of the value of all that and do more in terms of those, the outcomes, those success stories, not just impact in terms of the old school patents and so on, but a much broader, much more robust sense of the value of our research. And I think that and talent development is obviously key in that. And I think that the new capstone should be able to enable this in more nimble ways by, for example, building on the historic intertwining of the NSERC and SHIRC IT systems, HR, and so on. There's a lot of work that can be done and to make this much more efficient and really get us to on a path that we've had a great deal of success on, but we have to just push it further. So I think the capstone, as long as we don't think about it as a brand new entity, but rather situate it, I think we would be, we're going to be in a good place.
Yeah, I'd say, anyway, totally aligned, Chad, with what you're saying is that, the CRCC was a step. Some people might have said that, oh, it wasn't working as it should have been. I tend to disagree. It made some incredible progress in terms of bringing discussions that didn't happen in the past between the agencies and between the departments, and bringing in NRC. And suddenly there was a knowledge of what is the reality of each of these agencies that before, I think it was at the apex of collaboration during the pandemic in terms of between the different agencies. So that's great. Agree, and everybody agrees within the agencies, that yeah, we can do even better. We can increase again improve some collaboration, and that there is some work. Only one scholarship program. Oh, that's great that it's been decided by the government. I mean, the agencies were discussing it over the last 5 years. So, okay, that's done. At least that's a good first step, and more can be done. Totally agree that we don't need another bureaucracy and another organization. I think we have troubles just selecting a few presidents for the agencies that exist. I don't think it would be good to add another one, but yeah, totally agree.
Yeah, I'll just add in, I think the capstone is absolutely required. It is an evolution to where Canada has already been. The granting councils didn't dissolve, right, in this budget. They are there, SHIRC, NSERC, CIHR, for a reason. But the danger when we have our funding set up that way is that we don't have the cutting edge interdisciplinarity, and we don't maybe speak to the world on a mission-driven topic the way we need to. So the evolution of the CRCC and into this new capstone, I think, is key right now, where Canada has signed on to Horizon Europe, and then all of the new consortia that will be coming out in Pillar 2, which is all mission-driven in Horizon Europe. And this is a pool that is deeper than we can fathom, right? In terms, the whole of Horizon Europe is 98 billion, the Pillar 2, 54, I believe, and mission driven. So there's no way we can do the future without a really highly functioning capstone entity here, and it's recognized, and the evolution's required. And I'm excited about it. And I come back to that sort of, how do you get the balance right between the mission driven and the fundamental? And so that'll be an ongoing challenge. Maybe we'll hear a bit more about that as time goes on. But I think we have to always, as a country, think about the right balance to get the right impact from our research organizations.
Thank you all. So we'll continue with questions. We've got a few more minutes. We can sneak another one in, but I think I'll address this to Lisa first, if you don't mind. If I'm doing a word cloud of the questions from the audience, industry and internationalism is coming up quite a lot. So maybe you could provide some comments on how this budget will impact Canadian innovators, especially with international collaboration.
Well, I think there's a few ways. I think here, maybe let's turn to something that we haven't talked too much about, and that is the investments in our major research facilities, right? I mean, I think, as I said in my remarks, and I think Nancy also alluded to this, we need to have the best facilities in our country to compete, right? And those facilities provide opportunities for us to engage in discovery science, to train the next generation, but also to engage with the private sector. And so I think, when we're trying to increase innovation in this country, we won't be able to do it unless we have the kind of world-class facilities that we need in particular areas. And so I think the government investing in these facilities is a really important signal that they see this and they understand how important that is to provide the environment for cutting edge discoveries that will lead to innovation. And you know, I think one of the things that I see a lot at Triumph, because I'm on the board and so I'm quite familiar with what's happening at Triumph, but their innovation work is increasing exponentially. I think as they move into some new areas, they have many private sector partners now coming to the table saying, we want to work with you. And also they want to capitalize on the talent that is flowing through Triumph, right? I mentioned all of the staff. But the other thing that Triumph does, and I know other major research facilities in Canada do this as well, is they provide a home for co-op students, right? So this work integrated learning is critical. And so I think having these facilities in our ecosystem in Canada is crucial to drive innovation and invite in more private sector partnership.
Nancy, that's a new hand, I think, so please.
It is, but Dominique's was up before mine.
I don't think it went down.
Okay. So just on the point of innovation, if you read chapter 4, it's everywhere, which is, it's important. You know, fundamental research is the pipeline to get us to those great innovations. We have to always be careful on the balance there. I would say that if we look back maybe in the last 10 years about efforts to engage universities and industry, so super clusters, and now there's a couple of other programs, there's IRAP, I'm wondering if we just haven't quite got it yet, right? In terms of the engagement, of the true engagement with industry and universities. One way that, from a university perspective anyway, that I see that we're really making headway is through the NSERC Alliance program, where projects are co-developed, students get, you know, hands-on learning, and it's really focused on research that universities do together with industry. And I feel like that one is squarely in making progress on the industry relationships with universities. So I feel like there's still more to do here, and I'm hopeful that the Advisory Council on Science and Innovation will have a really nice balance of academia, industry, not-for-profit, in order to shepherd some of the advice going forward on that engagement, because I think it's a hard one. I think we're not quite there yet. And I'm really personally welcoming some creativity and innovation on innovation between universities and industry over the next few years.
Thank you. And
Now
now
it's a new end.
Yeah, I see it now.
No, and because this is super important, but at the same time, you know, it's a you can really build onto that ecosystem of industry and academia collaborations and get some great collaboration, experiential training for the students, as Nancy is saying. It's absolutely great in terms of delivering for the society, useful. But then you don't, from these kinds of collaboration, you're not going to get what the government is also expecting, which is independent IP, startups, and then new industry. And then we're sort of stuck in between. Are you selling short your IP because you're collaborating extremely early and co-constructing with the industry, which means that then the IP is tied in complicated agreements, and the universities needs to become extremely smart in terms of protecting the IP for other uses, which, you know, that's not our core business in general, to be very honest. And then you have that huge push towards entrepreneurship. You know, even NSERC has inherited an ISED program towards entrepreneurship trainings for the graduate students. I know that in Quebec, it's extremely important. And all of that entrepreneurship is really about bringing the scientific discovery to the market through the path of spin-off from the, which is a very different path from the other path. So that's going to be interesting to be able to maybe look at the different industries and have a better understanding of, you know, some approach might work in aerospace where the industry is already present and need all of that innovation. Whereas if you move towards biomanufacturing, where the industry is much more supportive of startups and spin-off, then maybe, yeah, then you can push. So anyway, well, there's going to have to be some discussions around that.
And Chad, go ahead, please.
Well, just quickly, I think the points just being made are connected to the fact that this new advisory council, I think, will really raise the profile and hopefully give much more public attention to exactly the kind of possibilities that Nancy and Dominique and others or Lisa have been talking about, everybody actually, because I think the intention of it is to have high-profile people involved, to perhaps even involve the Prime Minister, and really as ways that have been done in the past. As you know, there used to be those kind of national discussions, the kind of annual reports on where we are and so on. So I think that's another aspect to this, that in terms of our public presence, in terms of public debate about the value of what we do and why we do it, and how it can be in fact enhanced, I think that could play a key role.
Thank you all, and I am cognizant of the time, so I'm going to ask the very last question, and it has to be a really rapid fire answer if somebody has one that they want to give. But it did rise to the top of the pool, so we have to ask it. And in research, our core business is knowledge generation, dissemination, not just through innovation and product development, but also just through knowledge and paper publishing. So as the publishing model moves to more open access publishing and there's more pay for services, do you see something encouraging in this budget to move to that new publishing model, or are there going to be more challenges ahead? And very fast. So the first on the button gets to take it.
Open science, as open as possible, as secure as necessary.
Yep.
That's,
You're here.
that's a great advocacy for the next budget, investment in open science to make sure that we don't push the responsibility on each researchers.
That's right.
Totally agree.
Okay, there it is. And we have a unanimous answer to land on. So that's very nice. So I want to thank you all again. Chad Gatfield, Les Jacobs, Lisa Kalinchuk, Nancy Ross, Dominique Berube, and Thomas Bailey for joining us today. And you'll see on the side for the audience, there is some warnings, messages from our production team, and a feedback survey has now popped up on the screen. So if you enjoyed this, if you found it useful, please let us know. And in the meantime, I'll thank once again our panelists and you, the audience, for your really wonderful participation in today's session. So thank you all.
Thank you, Matt.
Matt.
Thank you.
Great job.
Yeah. Terrific job.
Thanks, Matt. Bye, everyone.